we're getting to the point in my history videos that we're actually in the era that I personally was involved in. And I'd like to talk today about Bill Clinton's loss of Congress in the '94 election. It was a stunning turnaround. He had been elected in '92 by a healthy margin, had taken control of both houses of Congress. The House had always been Democrat, but he ousted the Republican majority in the Senate and put in place a Democratic majority, and it seemed that he was unstoppable. But the problem was that at the very beginning of his presidency, he misunderstood the rules in the United States Senate. He did not understand that the filibuster had become so common and so regular that you really did not control the Senate until you had 60 votes. And he fell 5 or 6 or thereabouts short of the 60 vote requirement. So he thought that he had control of both houses, but he didn't. It wasn't that he was stupid and didn't know the rules. It was that the filibuster had only gradually become the norm in the legislative process. Back in the Reagan era and in the first Bush presidency, sometimes there would be a controversial bill that would come along and the minority party would refuse to let it come to the floor unless there were 60 votes in favor of it. But it's only during the Clinton presidency and after that it became a routine feature that you just didn't bring up a bill unless it had 60 votes. And it really started during the Clinton presidency. So at the very start of his administration, he thought that all he needed to do was to work with the Democratic Party. And he was very conscious of Jimmy Carter's example, where Carter had a majority in both houses, but he basically lost control of it. And Tip O'Neill the speaker was openly sniping at the Democratic president. So he met with the congressional leaders and he said, look, I'm going to do just what you want. I'm going to back programs with you. I'm going to bring you in, design those programs together, and then I'll rely on you guys to put it through. I warned him about that path. I told him, I said, you think that you're going to be their leader, but in fact you're going to be their hostage. Because you'll need to round up every single Democratic vote in order to pass your stuff. And the Democrats will force you further and further to the left. The Black and Latino caucuses, when the ultra-liberals and unions will have such demands that you'll ultimately be so liberal you won't be able to recognize yourself. And then I said, and on top of that, the further left you go, the more you leave the country behind. You were elected on the promise of being a new Democrat, a centrist, and you'll be disappointing those voters. And that turns out to be exactly what happened. He was pushing a bill that was an anti-crime measure. At its core, it provided for a federal death penalty and mandatory sentencing by state judiciaries, and was a very good, strong bill. But the left insisted that we add midnight basketball courts and all kinds of other public works projects and goodies and money for community centers and all that, and it became one big pork barrel bill. That was the fate of all legislation Clinton submitted. And no Republican would ever vote for his bills. So he had a very, very difficult time passing them, a very tough time getting to 60 votes. And ultimately he began to acquire a reputation for liberalism, weakness, and an inability to deliver. And by the time the 2 years of his presidency had elapsed, he was seen as somebody who had done nothing except raise taxes. He did get a tax bill passed, because that took only 51 votes, raising income taxes and raising the gasoline tax. And that was broadly resented by the entire country. Hillary failed to even get her health care bill out of committee, and welfare reform was never even really introduced. So he confronted the country with this record that was very, very limited. He brought me in to do some polling for him in the weeks really, before the '94 election. And what I urged him to do was to focus on the small bore achievements that he'd had. He had appointed pro-choice judges to the court. He had passed family and medical leave. He had set up AmeriCorps, the domestic equivalent of the Peace Corps. He'd done a lot of small things like that. And I said, people will like those, they'll believe that you did them, and they'll be very effective in helping you get your people reelected. But in a conference call with Bill and Hillary, Bill kept saying, I created 6 million jobs, I lowered interest rates, I cut the deficit by 1/3, I want credit for all that stuff. And I said, the polling shows people won't believe that. But he said, nope, I want credit. I did it. I'm going to educate them. And Hillary said, Bill, don't try to get elected for the right reasons. Just try to win the election. But Clinton wouldn't listen and did what proceeded down that road. Then I got a phone call from him about 5 days before the election. And he said, about a week before the election. And he said, where should I campaign this week? And I said, you shouldn't campaign. You should stay in the White House. And he said, no, you don't understand. I just signed a peace deal between Jordan and Israel. My ratings are up, and I wouldn't damage any candidates I campaign for. I think I'd really help them. Which district should I go into? And I said, you shouldn't go into any. If you start campaigning, you'll lose the presidential aura that you acquired in signing that peace deal, and you'll end up hurting your candidates. And then about 24 hours, 48 hours before the polls opened, Clinton called me and said, what do you think's going to happen? And I said, you're going to lose the House and the Senate. And he said, I could conceivably, possibly lose the Senate, but I doubt it. But I certainly am not going to lose the House. The House had not gone Republican for 40 years at that point. And I said, nope, you're going to lose them both. And I said, and then he was kind of dismissive, and I said, well, in case you actually do lose them both, you want me to send you a statement, you should give that night. And he said, yeah, send it to me. And the next I see is on Tuesday night TV giving my statement. So in the next few videos, I'll talk in some detail about my work for Clinton and what went on during that 2-year period. Thanks a lot.